story recapped here. Today I'm gonna explain a crime, drama, and fantasy film called Death Note. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Light Turner is a typical bad genius that gets commission-based gigs in answering assignments. One day, he hangs out near the school field, and Mia, a hot cheerleader, locks eyes with him and looks away. This baffles Light, but he shrugs it off and goes back to writing. Suddenly, the weather goes awful, and a mysterious leather-bound notebook falls from the sky and lands near Light. Curious, he picks it up and discovers that it's called Death Note. Suddenly, it starts to rain and everyone, including Light, runs into the school to seek shelter. Then, as he gets near the building, he witnesses two bullies robbing a helpless nerd. However, Light doesn't do anything about it, and Mia appears from behind him and stops the bullies herself. Triggered, the bullies push Mia, and this causes Light to call them out. Light then belittles and threatens Kenny, one of the bullies, which causes him to get punched in the face and soon black out. Moments later, Light regains consciousness, but he's still sprawled out on the wet concrete under the rain. Then, a teacher walks over to him and picks up the papers that other students pay him to do. Because of this, he gets sent to the principal's office, despite being the victim. Inside, Light tries to persuade the principal into looking at the bigger picture, but the principal instead belittles him by saying that his mom's death is not an excuse for such behavioral issues. Finally, the principal dismisses him with 2 weeks of detention. During detention, Light opens the Death Note and reads the rules on the front page. The first rule indicates that by writing someone's name inside, that person will die. Next, it tells that the note will not take effect unless a writer has the person's face in their mind. After reading this, Light gets curious and continues to flip through the notebook until he comes across a blank page. Suddenly, the lights flicker, and a jar of marbles falls to the floor. Because of this, Light checks it out, but behind the shelves, a tall, spiky creature with yellow eyes scares the life out of him. As if this isn't horrifying enough, everything in the room starts to fly around, and Light starts screaming like a lunatic. He attempts to exit through the door, but it's locked, so he resorts to hiding under the table. Then, the table gets tossed in the corner, and Light is more scared than ever. Later on, the room calms down, and the creature begins to talk to Light. Suddenly, they hear a girl screaming from outside, and the creature tells Light to check it out. Although he's confused, he complies and sees that Kenny and another bully are tormenting a girl. For this matter, the creature tells him to write down Kenny's name in the Death Note and how he wants him to die. Light writes down decapitation, and soon after, an accident causes a car to bump into a ladder rack and slice Kenny's head off. Seeing this, Light screams in horror, but the creature only laughs and tells him that he can be capable of great things. But if he decides that it's too much, he should leave the note alone for 7 days, and the creature will give it a new home. Later that night, Light gets into a heated argument with his father regarding his mom's death. His dad happens to be a cop, yet his mom's killer, Anthony Skolmall, is still running around free. Pissed, he runs up to his room and opens the note to read the other rules. Later on, the creature appears, and it turns out that he's a death god named Ryuk. Then, Ryuk reveals that a subject can be influenced for no more than 2 days leading up to his death, and each death must be physically possible. With this information, Light furiously writes down Anthony Skolmall's name. Later that night, Anthony dies by impaling himself with a steak knife while his blood spurts out everywhere. Light's father confirms this the next day, and he seems happy about it. At school, Mia approaches Light in the gym and asks him about the note in his hand. He agrees to tell her everything, but as he tries to reveal Ryuk, Mia doesn't see him because he's only visible to the keeper of the Death Note. Because of this, she's convinced he's gone mad, and now Light is desperate to prove her wrong. Later on, they both watch a televised hostage situation, and Light demonstrates the note's power by writing the criminal's name. It's not long until the criminal gets hit by a police car and dies. Mia can hardly believe it, but all the details in the note are horrifically accurate. Later that night, Light hangs out with Mia, and she tells him that they can change the world with the Death Note. Shortly after, they both head to Light's house and begin to make out. In the following days, they fall deeper in love, and while doing so, they continue to rid the world of crimes with a Death Note. Later on, the two decide to use the name Kira, which means killer in Japanese. They also begin influencing their subjects to preach about Kira before killing them, and so it quickly becomes a well-known name worldwide. However, investigators are still baffled about finding the true identity of their newfound messiah. Meanwhile, more than a dozen people were found dead in a nightclub somewhere in Japan. The reports suggest that this is Kira's doing, and the case attracts the attention of a detective named L. L has access to the police database, and with this, he has tipped off Kira by sending names of obscure criminals. After investigating the nightclub, L meets up with a man named Watari, and they both head to Seattle, where Light currently lives. There, Watari meets up with Detective James Turner, who also happens to be Light's dad. James wants to meet since he plans to endorse L in capturing Kira. Then James gets on a call with L, and he reveals that Kira created an intentional misdirection, making investigators think he's Japanese. He also adds that Kira is not operating in another continent, but is in Seattle. With all of his findings, L asks James if he wants to team up. Meanwhile, in school, Mia shows Light a website that a few Kira worshippers have created. In it is a list of people who committed heinous crimes. However, Light questions the credibility of that information, and they can't be so sure about believing website rumors. Elsewhere, Detective Turner and Watari head out to meet L. There, L reveals to James that Kira has access to Seattle's police database from the inside. He also hands him some folders containing evidence and soon leaves to talk to Kira. James chuckles at the thought as he finds the task impossible. Shortly after, L talks to the press and reveals that Kira is a mere person, not some omnipotent god. Then he threatens Kira by saying that he's coming for him. Watching through the television, Light is pissed and worried while Ryuk chuckles behind him. Later on, L tells James about his theory that Kira can't kill through sight alone. He needs a name and a face, which is why L has deprived Kira of both. Later that night, Light asks his father about L's identity and the ongoing case about Kira. However, James doesn't know L's real name, so Light learns nothing of value. The next day, James finds out that L assigned someone to investigate Light, which enrages him. True enough, an investigator follows Mia and Light around an amusement park. In the Ferris wheel, Light tells Mia that they should stop using the Death Note for a while. However, she tells him that they need to get rid of all the agents, but Light responds by reminding her that he's the owner of the note. Mia gets upset with him for this reason. The next day, one of the Seattle's head detectives suddenly dies from a heart attack, and the 12 agents under his team commit suicide by jumping off a building. The case angers James because this is the first time that Kira has attacked law enforcement. Light also hears of this news, but he did not write down the names, so he immediately assumes that Ryuk is responsible for it. Later that day, James bravely announces to the press that Kira killed the 12 FBI agents. He also expresses how Kira is a coward and a murderer, which worries Mia and Light, who's watching him through the television. Pissed, Mia grabs the Death Note and plans to write James' name on it, but Light stops her and yells at her to quit their mission and leave. Later that night, Light waits by the stairs and immediately embraces his father when he gets home. Meanwhile, L has already connected the dots and tells Watari that Light Turner is Kira. Elsewhere, Light sits alone in a cafe while reading a book about the death god, Ryuk. Suddenly, L hops on a chair before him and reveals that he knows he's Kira. Then, Light starts asking questions too, and he realizes that L doesn't know anything about the Death Note or Ryuk. Shortly after, L reveals his face with no trace of fear. Then he tells Light that even if he rid the world of criminals, Kira will still go to jail for killing over 400 individuals. But with a lack of proof, Light leaves the cafe safely and immediately goes home, only to find Mia waiting for him in the rain. Then, Mia apologizes for trying to kill his father, and she tells him that she loves him. Shortly after, the two share a romantic kiss in the rain. Later that night, they try to look for L's real name as Light has already seen his face. With this in mind, they write in the Death Note that Watari will become obsessed with discovering the real name of the detective known as L. For the next 48 hours, he will also stop communicating with the outside world and only update what he learns to Light's phone number. However, Light doesn't really plan to kill him because, according to Rule 89, a person can be spared if the page where his name lies gets burned. Shortly after, Light receives a call from Watari, saying that the information is unknown to him. He also adds that L was under his care after receiving him from St. Martin's Orphanage in Montauk, and it turns out that he is one of the Rochester wards, who are orphans trained at a young age to become great detectives. Unfortunately for Light, L's name only exists in the Rochester records, so he forces Watari to go there and find it. That same night, L welcomes himself to the Turner's house and tells everyone that Watari left without informing him of his plans. Thinking that Light has something to do with it, L breaks down and tells James that his son is Kira. However, James thinks this is outrageous, so he tells Elle to leave, but the young detective has a warrant and a team of men waiting outside. Later on, James pins Elle to the table when he threatens Light. Because of this, Elle commands the police to search the house, and Light starts to worry when he can no longer find the note after the search. Meanwhile, Watari drives to Montauk to discover Elle's true name. At school, Mia gives Light his outfit for the homecoming dance, and she also tells him that the note is safe with her. Later that night, they attend the dance, and when Watari's death draws nearer, Light calls him. However, Watari hasn't found Elle's name yet, so Light plans on burning his page before he dies. But to his horror, the page has already been torn from the note, and he assumes Mia took it. Panicking, Light screams at the phone, begging Watari to leave and abandon his task. Unfortunately, it's too late, and Watari gets killed by security for trespassing before he can reveal Elle's true name. Shortly after, Light returns to the dance, and Mia can already tell that he knows what's going on. Later on, she manipulates Light by telling him she saved him, but to make things worse, she also reveals that she killed all the agents in the Kira case. As if Mia doesn't sound crazy enough, she also tells Light that she wrote his name in the note and he'll die at midnight, but if he surrenders the death note, she'll burn his page. Because only one name can work under this rule, Watari had to die to make way for Light. On the contrary, Elle learns of Watari's death, pushing him to pursue a personal manhunt against Light. However, James sends the other cops to detain Elle and keep his son under protective custody. Meanwhile, Light is in the school's computer room, writing down a bunch of names on the note. Then he flees and tells Mia to meet him at the Ferris wheel. However, as Light runs out of the school, Elle sees him, and they begin to have a long and intense chase. As Light desperately runs for his life, Elle continues to chase him with a gun in hand. Somehow, Light gets cornered near a restaurant, but when a civilian learns that he is Kira, the civilian hits Elle in the head. Because of this, Light arrives on the Ferris wheel to meet Mia. There, Light convinces Mia to let the note be because she'll never see him again if she takes it. However, she still takes it, and Light's eyes widen in horrification. It turns out that he wrote Mia's name beforehand, and if he fails to convince her and she takes the note, she'll die. True enough, Ryuk makes the Ferris wheel collapse, and this causes the couple to dangle in the air. James, who happens to be down below, desperately tries to save his son, but the other cops prevent him from going near. Meanwhile, the death note falls out of their Ferris wheel cart, and as Mia desperately tries to catch it, she falls to her death. Not long after, Light falls into the water with the note, and his page lands in the fire. Then, somewhere on the shoreline, an unknown person takes the death note. A few days after, it is shown that the incident put Light in a coma, and at the same time, Elle gets questioned by his superiors. They ask him how Light could be Kira if he's in a coma and there have been 4 deaths in the last 48 hours. Back in the hospital, someone returns the death note to Light while he's asleep. Contrarily, Elle is preparing to leave Seattle as he has been removed from the team for misconduct. However, at the last minute, he stops the plane from taking off and takes care of some business. In the hospital, James walks into the room and tells Light that he knows he's Kira. It all became clear to him when he realized that Anthony Skolmal was actually the first target. Then, he asks his son how it works, and Light tells him that he's arranged the future before his accident. Before meeting Mia, Light uses the note to influence a criminally charged doctor to save him and put him into a medically induced coma. Then, at the end of his period, he'll commit suicide by leaping to his death. Meanwhile, a retired mailman who's a child molester also becomes influenced to retrieve the death note from the river and continue Kira's killings. Then, on the second day, he'll return it to Light and kill himself. He also reveals that Mia will tear the page containing Light's name on the night of the accident, and it'll burn in the fire. He will also be spared while Mia strikes the shoreline and dies. Hearing this, James becomes disappointed in his son. However, Light holds himself accountable, but he justifies it as choosing the lesser evil. Little does Light know that Elle is currently at Mia's house, and he's found a page from the death note. Filled with pent-up anger, Elle considers writing someone's name, but it isn't revealed. In the end, Ryuk shows himself to Light and says, "You humans are so interesting."
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.